Hi, everybody. Welcome to PickFu's third Thursday live chat. I'm here with our co-founders, John Lee and Justin Chen.
Hey, everyone.
So today we are going to get super nerdy, and we are going to show you a little bit of our methodology, kind of show you our work. It's kind of a strange thing to think about, but there actually are a lot of different ways to count. And so, most of you who have been using PickFu for a while, you're probably pretty familiar with, how we do two options. So, basically the option with the most votes wins, right? So, here's an example of which audio intro do you prefer for a podcast about e-commerce sellers, right? And we've got a relative score of 50.8 to 49.2, representing a percentage. And then we've got a number of votes, raw votes, right? So there were 500 people in this poll, and 254 of them voted for option A, and 246 of them voted for option B. But when we get into more than two options, that's where things can get a little bit more complicated. And so we are going to talk about that and how we at PickFu count the votes and what that means for your polls. So like I said, this is going to get crazy nerdy. And so if you are confused by what we are saying, please feel free to use the comments to ask us any questions. We will answer them as soon as they come in. You can also go to this link if you're watching the replay, and you can submit questions there, and we'll get to them in our next Third Thursday. You can also go to that link and enter to win a free poll. So let's get into it. Again, what we're talking about here is basically this is what two options look like. But if I were to go to the PickFu poll builder, and here I've got option A and option B. As soon as I add a third option, then you're going to see I have another choice to make. And I've got to choose between a ranked poll and a head-to-head poll. And so, let's talk a little bit about that difference. Justin, why don't you explain the difference?
Sure. Yeah. So there's two different approaches that we take when there's between 3 and 8 options that you're comparing. So in a ranked poll, the poll respondents are going to see all of the options at once in a randomized order, and then they're going to be asked to rank their preference. They have to rank all of them in the order of first choice, second choice, and they have to do it for, if you have 8, they'll have to rank all 8. PickFu will then aggregate their votes to determine a winner. In the process of doing this, each respondent's only going to write one comment explaining why they ranked them this way. Most of the time, they're going to focus on why they chose the first choice, but a lot of times they'll also explain why they chose the order of C, B, A, etc. And so, if you look at the results, actually, you'll actually be able to see that every respondent did choose ranking. And I think most of our customers don't even realize this, but there's a lot of information here. And if you hover over it, it actually does show the ranking of, B, C, A, and that's what the colored boxes represent as well. So you can really dig into to the details of every respondent, and in the header of every section, it even shows you some aggregate statistics around what most of the people who chose option B chose as their second choice. And that's actually pretty useful information if you're trying to decide between a lot of different options. So if we go over to a head-to-head poll, so a head-to-head poll, It's more like a softball league or like a round robin tennis match. This is really common in sports where every team plays every other team in the league. And so in a head-to-head poll, the respondents see every single matchup 2 at a time. So it's kind of like our basic A versus B poll, but like every single permutation of it. So it's option A versus option B, and option A versus option C, and option B versus option C. And you'll see you could see on the screen right here, the result of every single matchup. And so when respondents see this, they're actually doing a bunch of mini poll responses essentially, and they're asked to write a comment about every single one. And so you're actually going to get a comment for every single matchup. And you're going to get a lot more data and explanations this way. So it gives you a much more complete picture of how your options fared against each other. And it's a much more thorough evaluation of how the options fare. And that's why a lot of sports leagues do, a round robin tournament, so that they can be sure that, it's not a single game elimination and, they didn't have just like one bad day, but it's actually, you are the best one coming out of it.
So, okay, that's a good explanation. What is happening, I guess, behind the scenes? Like, how are these votes being tabulated? So, John, why don't you start us off by explaining how we do things in a ranked poll?
Yeah, sounds good. So can we take a look at that? I think there was a 5-option ranked poll.
Yes.
Yeah, this one. Great. So here's a 5-option ranked poll where the customer is trying 5 different versions of a logo that they want to use. Like this is a ranked poll. So every single respondent of these, I believe, was it 50 people, ranked their favorite choices in order. So how this works here, ranked, how we count the votes here is that there's multiple rounds of counting until an option gets a majority of the votes. If no option receives a majority of first place votes, then the option with the fewest votes are eliminated. And then those eliminated options for that, the votes for that eliminated option, they get reassigned to the next preference of those voters among the other remaining options. And this goes in rounds. And this process is known as instant runoff voting. And this continues until a majority winner emerges. So for every ranked poll, you see this pop up here that you can click on that will show you exactly how the votes are counted. In this case, round one of the first round, these are all the first place votes, and round one did not produce a winner, right? So the leading option was option A. 22 out of the 25 out of the 50 respondents preferred option A and voted for option A as number 1, but 22 is not a majority of 50. So there is no winner in this first round. So what we do here is we take the option with the fewest votes. In this case, option C and D both had the fewest votes. We randomly choose one, and then we eliminate it. In this case, it was option C. So option C had 3 first place votes. Those votes, option C is eliminated. And the respondents, you can actually hover over those individual people icons and actually see the rankings of those individual respondents. They get reassigned so that their votes go to their second place preferences. Now we look at the counts again. Again, option A is leading with 22 votes, but it's not, 22 again is not a majority of 50. So we go on to another round. Now we take the fewest vote, the option with the fewest votes, which is option D. Those 3 votes are now redistributed based on those respondents' preferences. And now option A has 23 votes now. It gained another vote. But again, option 23 is not a majority of 50. So we go on to the next round. Option B now was the one, the remaining option with the fewest votes. I believe that was 8 votes. Yeah, so option B's 8 votes were redistributed to based on the voters' preferences. And so now option A got 5 more votes, I think, in this case, bringing its total to 28. And so 28 gets it past that 50% mark, that majority mark. So that's how we determine that out of this entire set of 5 options, option A is the most preferred choice and the winner in this ranked poll.
Right. Yeah. And we should say that this instant runoff is all happening in the background. So all of this counting happens instantaneously, right? Because those votes are put in all at one time. And so, you don't have to do any of this counting, but what is happening is PickFu is looking for a majority winner, right? We are trying to find in the fastest and fairest way that we think, to come to a consensus answer is to count votes in this way.
Right.
Yeah,
And I mean, can we take a look at the score on those, Kim?
I'm sorry?
Can we take a look at the score on those? I know that some customers sometimes have a question about the scoring on a ranked poll. So the scoring on a ranked poll represents the final percentage of votes that option got before it was eliminated. So in a ranked poll, there's always only going to be one option that has a score greater than 50. So in this case, the winner, option A, by the time the voting was done, it won 56% of the votes.
Yeah, I want to point out too that a lot of customers do ask us why we don't just offer a single multiple choice. And if you look at the round one, that's kind of the reason, right? Because if you just ask everyone to choose a single option all the time and you're comparing 8 different options, you're almost never going to have a majority winner and you're not going to have a clear outcome. And it's kind of like presidential races, right? And it's going to require you to go through a lot of rounds if you're not using instant runoff. So this way we're able to collect all that data ahead of time and not force you to go through multiple rounds of polls and just, you've already got their full preference.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think that there is, especially with elections and stuff, you can definitely debate sort of the pros and cons of various ways of vote counting. And I think that if you weren't using instant runoff or ranked choice voting and you used just whoever gets the most votes, a lot of times what ends up happening is that the winner is the one that maybe has the most vocal, like most minorities, but maybe is not necessarily the most preferred out of like the entire group of people who are voting.
Right. So if you think about it in terms of an election where there might be a third party candidate, right, where votes get split, right. So the person who wins isn't necessarily, the person could win potentially with 30% of the vote, right? And so it's not necessarily the preference of the population as a whole. And so that's kind of how we think about it here at PickFu. It's interesting. About a year ago, we even we talked about this in the context of elections, and why we do this here at PickFu is because we think it is the fastest and fairest way to vote. Respondents only have to vote one time. They don't have to show up at the polls another time if there is a runoff. Right? It happens instantaneously. And what happens then is you come to a consensus. And so I think that's part of our calculation as far as why this method was chosen for ranked polls.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's contrast that then with what happens in a head-to-head poll. So here's a 5-option poll. We've got these different themes for a mobile game, and the respondent pool is 50 mobile gamers between the ages of 25 and 64. So there's kind of a lot going on here. Why don't you walk me through what's happening in the background here and how we count this?
Yeah, sure. So with the head-to-head poll, it's a tournament style, and we actually do believe that this is the fastest and the fairest way to get a confident result in which one is the winner. And I'd like to just contrast this with another tournament style, which is more of an elimination tournament. So that's what you would see in the NCAA March Madness, where as soon as you lose, you're out of the tournament. But if you're matched up unfavorably, like that can lead to disaster. So with the round robin tournament that we're doing, every option goes head to head. So like I said before, A versus B, A versus C, A versus D, etc. And what we're doing here is we're seeing how many matches they've won. And so if you look at the table, the highlighted colors those are the matches that they've won, and we're essentially just going to tally up. The score represents the percentage of matchups that option won. So it does depend on how many they were in, and then how many votes that they won out of those potential votes. And so the great thing about these matchups, if you click into the tabs, is that you can see the explanations of every single matchup. And so for companies that are really trying to decide, really try to scrutinize between a lot of close options, they can thoroughly read through why, A versus B or A versus C, because like we've always said, like you don't always have to take the winning option. There could be a lot of editorial reasons that you might choose something, and you might read through the comments and decide that, we're going to make a decision to go in this direction because that's, the sentiment is sometimes more important than the quantitative winner. So this is the absolute way to get the most sentiment from our respondents, because they are literally writing an explanation for every single matchup.
And you can actually click in the all respondents sort of sub-tab and actually see all the respondents and how every respondent responded to every single matchup in this case. So there's a lot of information here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've talked a little bit about, the various considerations, in these different poll types, but really kind of, I guess, like to put a pin on it, like when is a ranked poll, I guess, quote unquote, better, and when is a head-to-head poll better?
Yeah, so good question. Generally, we advise that ranked polls, they tend to complete faster because the respondents only vote once. And because of that, because less is asked of the respondent, they're generally less expensive than head-to-head polls. But head-to-head polls give you a more comprehensive picture of how every option compared against another, and a lot more written feedback to help you understand why one option wins versus another. So the head-to-head poll often tends to be popular with sort of more data-driven industries like mobile gaming and software.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, the other point that I would probably say is that if you're deciding between things that don't need as much scrutiny, and maybe the variations are not as vast, I think this is a good example of a head-to-head, because every option is very different, and you actually are kind of curious about, why you chose B versus C. But if you're just choosing through like 5 different colors of the exact same thing, ranked is probably fine, right? Because you don't need to hear, oh, I like blue over green, I like green over orange, and over and over and over, right? So the explanations kind of lose some value there. Here, there's a ton of value in the explanations when the options are very different.
Yeah, I mean, like the responses could probably open a lot more doors, right, based on all the different responses of A versus D, A versus E, and so on. I mean, the customer here probably would have been able to read through all the responses and figured out, even though option D won out of this head-to-head matchup, there's probably dozens of ideas that they got about why some other option may have been preferred, that they could then go and iterate on the style of option D to make it even stronger.
Yep.
Yeah, it's interesting because in this particular option, right, we've got a bakery, but we've actually got 2 unicorn options, and we've got a kitty option, and we've got kind of this globe option, right? So it is interesting because it's like, okay, well, yes, you could see unicorn versus bakery, but you can also see unicorn versus unicorn, right?
Yeah.
So if the unicorn is the direction you're ultimately going to go in, then in this one poll, you've already seen, okay, well, which unicorn option is better?
Right. And maybe in the next one, maybe they don't want to split the unicorn vote here.
That's right.
So, we
never want to split the unicorn.
Never.
So, I mean, Justin, John, I mean, just because I've gotten a peek, sort of as these products were being built, I mean, tell me a little bit about kind of the math, sort of the calculations that went into, all of these schemes that you considered.
There was math. I will say that I think the origin of the head-to-head was actually from customers. So initially, way back when PickFu first started, all PickFu offered was a single 2-option head-to-head, A versus B, and we wanted to keep it simple. And what we saw from customers were that, oh, I have more than 2 options. So what the customers would do is they would run A versus B, B versus C, A versus C, and they would manually try to put all these 3 or 6 or however many combinations of polls together. And so we saw that coming from customers, and that's how we decided to use the head-to-head. And then after that, once we offered head-to-head, then customers also wanted an option where maybe they don't like what Justin mentioned, where they're just choosing colors and they don't need that many responses. And so that's when we went and researched a lot of different sort of voting methodologies. You know, should it just be the single vote, whoever gets the most first place votes, or other round robin votes, or so on. And that's how we discovered instant runoff voting and ranked choice voting. And we felt that we nerded out pretty hard about election and vote counting methodologies to decide on this one.
Yeah, again, it all goes back to what's the fastest and what's the fairest.
Yeah.
And how can every option get a fair shake, right? We want to make sure that it's it's not just by chance of a unicorn versus a kitty, right? It's every character in the set has an opportunity to win. So so this was a very geeky glimpse into what happens behind the scenes at PickFu. I want to thank you for watching. If you have any questions or you want to enter to win a free poll, please visit the link below. And we will see you next month. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.